Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me? Oh yeah, how's that sound? Good, good, good. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you for all being here. This is a monumentous occasion. And let me just start off by saying I am a man of faith, and my faith is what gives me my sense of justice and my sense of order and honor. And because of that faith, I think it is necessary for me to start out in prayer. And this is no slight to anyone who is not of faith, but for the sake of peace and unity, I would like to start in prayer. Father, first of all, I give your name praise and glory and honor for who you are. I thank you for allowing us to gather here this evening. I thank you that people are here wanting to hear truth, wanting to make change, striving for justice to be served, wanting for peace to prevail. And Father, I ask that you touch the minds and the hearts of everybody here. You allow us to see one another's perspectives and make that change. Father, let your will be done, not ours. Let us set ourselves aside our implicit biases, our prejudices, our misunderstandings and misgivings, and let your truth abound. I thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for coming again. I don't know if everybody really knows the importance of today and every day as we move forward. First of all, let's do some housekeeping. I want to make sure that everybody in attendance is always respectful. We want to make sure that this is a peaceful rally from start to finish, because there's been too many times where gatherings turn violent because of aggression. So let's make sure that we stay peaceful. Yes, amen. And that means let's be respectful for one another. Even those who have differing opinions and views, let's be respectful. Let people speak, because we need to have the conversation. There are a number of times when we have a discussion with people who do not agree with us. We need to let everybody have a voice, and then we can have a dialogue. So let people speak. And third, expect opposition, because opposition is a natural part of change. Expect that opposition, but know how to deal with it. Do not deal with opposition with aggression. If somebody comes to you with aggression, know how to diffuse it. We are all here unified, which means you are not alone, which also means that you don't have to respond to aggression in kind. We will stand up for you and trying to promote and maintain peace and unity, okay? So if there are some counter protesters here, do not respond in any aggression, please. We will be protected. We will protect one another. We will protect you, okay? That is our goal. That is our purpose as a community, to look out for one another. I want to thank everybody who made this possible. The University of Oregon School of Music and Dance, the Black Student Task Force, First Baptist Church of Eugene, the NAACP, Black Unity, the City of Eugene, Linda and Rick Hamilton, Bobby Green Sr., Senator James Manning, Councilman Greg Evans, George Russell, Lily Parker, Scott DeLorme, Bobby Green Jr., AKA DJ Smooth. Forgive me if I forget anybody else. There were a lot of people who assisted in making this happen. I also want to thank those who are in attendance today who gave us their support. Our elected officials, Mayor Lucy Venice, City Manager Sarah, I'm gonna butcher the last name, I apologize. Maderi. City Manager Sarah Maderi, and Police Chief Chris Skinner. I wanna thank all of you for coming out, and all of you who made this possible. The purpose of this rally is to address the issues that we face with the Portland riots and not riots, I don't want to use that word. The Portland protests that have turned violent, and the protests here in Lane County that have that have also been given a negative light. There are multiple reasons why that has happened. We will discuss that. And we are also here to show a unified front between the Black activist groups here in town, because unity is necessary. When we show a unified front and it's very clear, then we can then expect our allies to be unified as well. And so a unified front is very necessary. We are also here to reconcile the police to the community, because they have, we have a lot of issues with that, as you know. There are issues with connection with the police and the community, and not just in Eugene, also in Springfield. And we will speak to that as well. We are here to give a telling of the history of the city of Eugene and their historic Black families. We are here to discuss the confusion with terms such as BIPOC and people of color, and the confusion that people have with the sentiment of Black Lives Matter. It's very important that we have an understanding as we walk away from this rally today. And again, as opposition comes in, please do not respond with any aggression. Also, we are here to discuss the next step action plans on how to make change, how to make it not only possible, but how to see it happen. There are measurable steps that we can make to see change here. Now, I want to start with what I observed as I went to Portland and saw an attendance in the protest there. Yeah. What I saw was there were 4,000 people in about a 2-square block radius, and it started off very peaceful. The energy was great. People were marching and chanting. And the chanting started, it was, say their name, George Floyd, say their name, Breonna Taylor, say their name, Black Lives Matter, no justice, no peace. It was beautiful. And as we got to the Justice Center, those chants turned into more aggressive chants. And as I moved to the front towards the gate, I asked people around, what are we here for? Why are we trying to get into the Justice Center? Why are we pushing up against this gate? What is the purpose of defunding and abolishing the police? And they could not tell me. I then asked them, who are the leaders here? They could not tell me. I asked them, what are the ramifications of all that they are wanting to make happen? They could not tell me. And that led me to believe, and that showed me that most people do not know. People who are out there, they're angry, rightly so, and they want to be a part of something, but there is no leadership. There's no organization, and that can become a problem. And it has become a problem. In the 4,000 people that were in that space, I went all up and down all those blocks, all around the park, all around that gate that surrounded the Justice Center, and I counted about 15 Black people. The majority of them were white, which is fine because we need allies in every movement. But the problem is that the Black voice was not heard in that moment. And that is a problem when you have a rally, when you have a movement, and those who are being moved for are not the focal point. And that also has been the problem a lot of times here in Eugene. When I came here back to Eugene the next day, I saw something very similar to a smaller scale. We were at the sheriff's department, and people were calling for the abolition of police. Nobody could tell me why. People were wanting to make all these things happen. Nobody could tell me why. I asked who the leadership was. Nobody could tell me. In fact, they said it's purposely being kept vague because I need information. I wanted information so I could know what the purpose was, but nobody could tell me. it's very necessary that when you step into a movement, you do not co-opt that movement. You do not hijack that movement, because then it becomes appropriation. And it is very ironic that people can appropriate a movement that is meant to help the very people it's being appropriated from. So we need to make sure that this community never does that. Now, I am very, very blessed to be in contact with some amazing people. This was not a work of my own, as I stated before. This is a collective unit, a community that rallied around, saw a need, saw that there was just too much disconnection, too much confusion, and said we need to come together, and we need truth and organization and information to abound. Because where there is information and unity, there can be peace. And above that, there should not be peace just in status quo, just in system. There must be peace in the change and in justice. Because people a lot of times believe that only peace will happen because law and order abound. But law and order has oftentimes left those who seek justice disenfranchised. So peace must be achieved as justice abounds. I'm going to bring up a man who will speak to one of these points, the need for unity. George Russell is the principal. Some of you know George Russell. George Russell is the principal in George Russell and Associates, an education and management consulting firm here in Eugene, Oregon. He's affiliated with BWP and Associates of Libertyville, Illinois, as an executive search consultant. He retired in 2011 as the superintendent of the Eugene Public Schools, having served in that role from March 1998 to July 2011. Before becoming superintendent, he was the executive director of human resources for the school district. He previously worked for school districts in San Diego and Seattle as an assistant superintendent and as human resources director for the Oklahoma City Public Schools. Before joining that, he worked for Lane County government as the director of human resources and management services from 1991 to 1995, where he also served as county treasurer and county clerk. This man has considerable experience with organizing, with protest, with rally, with unity. He is, and I'm going to let him speak to it, but he's also has been a member of SNCC, which he will speak to in his own right. Please welcome George Russell.
Thank you, Andiel. I'm going to share some brief remarks, and I hope that you can hear me over the motorcycles and the loud exhausts. Good evening. As Andiel said, my name is George Russell. For 12 years, I was the Black superintendent of schools for the Eugene School District. And I say that because for the entire time, all 4,380 days, there wasn't a day that went by that I wasn't reminded that I was Black and that I should not forget it. Most of the times, those reminders were subtle. And a lot of the times, they were unintended. But there were times they were very overt and quite intentional. But I get ahead of myself. I've been asked to share a little bit of personal and historical perspective and some thoughts on striving for racial equality and justice. I'm here to remind us that we're here because Black lives matter. And that's not to say that other lives don't matter or that they don't matter as much, because they do. But it's important to remember that for far too long, and that for far too many people, Black lives have not mattered. They haven't mattered in this country, they haven't mattered in this state, and they haven't mattered in Lane County or in Eugene or in Springfield. Black lives haven't mattered in our schools, in housing, in jobs, in healthcare, in law enforcement and the courts, or in governments that on a daily basis subject Black people to institutional and systemic racism that is as deadly as the bullets, the chokeholds, or the police brutality that killed Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, George Floyd, and so many other Black Americans over the years. But again, I get ahead of myself. I grew up as a child of the 50s and the 60s who knew segregated schools and neighborhoods and faced blatant racial discrimination, who experienced whites only and colored only signs at restaurants, hotels, and restrooms, whose family traveled with the Green Book on the dashboard of their car when going south to visit relatives, and whose father, at the age of 9, gave him the talk. Now, you all know about the talk, the same one that many of you, well, maybe not so many, because I don't see that many faces that look like me out there, but the same talk that many were given and that some of you gave your children and grandchildren. If you don't know about the talk, ask one of your Black friends or colleagues to enlighten you. We're here today because we don't want our children or grandchildren to have to be given that same talk to their children and grandchildren. But it was in the early 60s when I first began my journey for civil and equal rights for African Americans. Now that obviously dates me. I was just beginning my second year at Howard University, an historically Black university in Washington, D.C., when a few of my friends decided that we should go over to the march that was taking place at the National Mall. The date was August 28, 1963, and it turned out to be one of the most important days of my life, and in their case, their lives. It began for many of us a journey that is to this day still incomplete, a journey for equal justice and for civil rights. And yes, since that day, we've seen some progress, and we've seen some tremendous Black leaders who've come along and have passed along. My alma mater spawned a lot of those young leaders who would tell us today to keep our eyes on the prize and to not be distracted or co-opted by those who have other agendas that are not in our best interest. In those days, we had young leaders like Stokely Carmichael, H. Rap Brown, and John Lewis with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Dr. King and Ralph Abernathy with SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. James Farmer with CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality. And Roy Wilkins with the NAACP. As well as Huey Newton and Eldridge Cleaver of the Black Panthers. and so many others that I don't have time to mention. And here locally, we've had some great leadership from African-American families who have been pioneers for equality in this community. Families like the Reynolds, the Washingtons, and the Sims, who have been in the forefront of fighting for racial equality and justice in Eugene and Springfield for generations. Today, we're looking to a new generation of young leaders to move us forward, to end decades of police brutality against African Americans and bring down the walls of institutional and systemic racism. But we want to do it with the same commitment and perseverance that those freedom riders and marchers and leaders started in the 60s. We want to bring about the change that is needed to make this a better community and a better world. Today, I'm so pleased to see our young leaders step forward to say enough is enough. That we can't continue to have our Black lives so undervalued and so thought of as being disposable, that we have to do something and do something now. Let's keep the momentum and take full advantage of this time. Keep marching, keep protesting, and keep demonstrating. Let's continue to make trouble for the power structure. And as John Lewis would make it, good trouble, necessary trouble. And let's do it in solidarity and with our eyes constantly on the prize. The time is now to let our national, state, and local leaders know that we won't be deterred by platitudes, complacency, or inaction. That the time is now to do more than just say Black Lives Matter. That the time is now to hold our institutions accountable. And the time is now to end systemic racism and police brutality. And by so doing, to actually show that in fact, Black lives matter. Thank you.
Because we must be safe. And my apologies for not doing that before you stepped up. It was not intentional. One more round of applause, please, for George Russell. The next topic is the fact that we need to reconcile the police to the community. I personally I find issue with the term abolish. I find it problematic. And it wasn't until I met with some of the leaders of Black unity that I understood what they meant by abolish. And please correct me in private if I mistake. But they mean taking funds from purchasing fully automatic weapons and tanks and war tactical equipment and tear gas and the like, and reallocating those funds to community programs and mental health response teams like Cahoots, programs that benefit the community in a much more specific way, because the police should never be called for a mental health crisis. Is that kind of along the lines of what you? Thank you. So also they want to upend the system and policies that have allowed cops to historically disproportionately target Black people. And that is something that we see all too often. And with the invention of camera phones, we are now seeing it done on a regular basis, seeing it done live. And we are seeing a lot of times live executions of Black bodies. And that is why now a lot of people are outraged, people who have not known about it previously. We've seen it happen far too often. But at this juncture, at this moment, in this community, police are still very necessary, and I'll tell you why. There are people who live in Springfield, Black people who live amongst white people who have been relatively peaceful until 2016, from what they tell me. And now, with things coming to a boiling point, with protests happening due to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, they are experiencing even more discrimination and harassment, some of them getting death threats, some of them having armed people standing in their yard for hours at a time, and they feel too afraid to call the police. They feel like the police is not going to be there for them. I know that a number of people here in Eugene, unfortunately, and this city as well, have felt the same thing. And so that should never be the case. The police should be here for their people and all people. Because as one of the members of Black Unity had spoke yesterday, if all lives truly matter, then the police should never choose sides on which matter. Unless, of course, they're making a statement that some lives matter more than others. And historically, it seems that Black lives do not matter. And that is the sentiment that I gathered from Black Unity. Is that correct? Thank you. So I'm gonna bring someone up to speak to that. And this young man is doing me, all of us, a great service in stepping forward to speak, because we lost one of our speakers to speak to this point. So he's volunteered his voice. So I want you to give a warm welcome to Issa Stroud.
Most agree that the actions of the police officers in the cases of both George Floyd and Breonna Taylor were atrocious. Those in uniform who swore oaths to protect and serve became the very ones that we needed protection from, and tragedy ensued. And while the majority of the nation expressed outrage that this could happen in 2020, there was a segment of society whom this was another day in the life of America. For those people, for African-American descendants of slavery, this was not an exception, but was and has always been the rule. In reaction to what we witnessed with Brother Floyd, many have called for the need for sweeping police reform, while others have little faith in the ability to bring real change. And therefore, they believe that the only true reform is the total abolishment of the policing institution. Our brothers and sisters in the dynamic and growing group of young activists known as Black Unity take this posture, while we advocate for reform. And although we disagree on approach, we stand unified in the reality that change must come, and it must come now. With this in mind, we had an opportunity to sit down with Eugene Police Chief Skinner. Chief Skinner was able to provide us with insight on reforms. He recognized that change needed to be made and confirmed that he was working with Senator James Manning and the City Council to accomplish these reforms. Chief Skinner is on record saying that in his hiring process, he's looking for specific types of officers, those with the capacity to empathize and be compassionate to those they're serving. He also gave us a list of outdated policies that he's committed to see changed. He recognized that Eugene Police should not only be
bullshit. Skinner should step down. Democracy wasn't working then, and it's not.
He recognized that Eugene Police should not only be police for some, but instead should protect and serve us all. Thank you, Police Chief Skinner, for your cooperation.
Thank you, Isa, for reading that statement. And thank you all for being respectful and holding your peace in the midst of opposition. I told you it was going to happen. That's the climate we live in. So thank you all. Give yourselves a round of applause for that. Because I guarantee you there are those who wish to see every demonstration, every gathering turn violent, turn aggressive. And as you see us here in unity, you see us here keeping cool, keeping our calm, I appreciate that you all do the same. I thank you for that. We're going to move on to the next topic. I want to bring up an economist whose name is Dr. William Sandy Darity, who is the professor at Duke University. He has done substantial research in talking about the racial wealth gap in America. And to that end, he said something that's very profound. The United States has said that at the abolition of slavery, that every black family should get 40 acres and a mule. And we want to make sure that we understand the significance of 40 acres. But before we do, 40 acres for every black family would have amounted to 400 million acres of land in the United States. 400 million. Now, we did not get that. But what we did do on our own accord, to our own volition, was we got and acquired 15 million acres of land, which was subsequently taken through corrupt policy, through theft, through all of the above. But let me tell you what the significance of just 400 acres does. On 400 acres of land, you could feasibly, comfortably fit 900 homes. And what 400 acres does is it allows a generational wealth procession to be passed down. That's something that we did not get. And most of us are here or are aware of this struggle because of what happened to George Floyd. Let me tell you about George Floyd's great-grandfather. George Floyd's great-grandfather was born into slavery, was released with the Emancipation Proclamation, then started a business, and it was very successful because he was a great craftsman, worker of his hands. He then bought 500 acres of land in Georgia. He married a woman who was also a former slave. And they had this house that they built on this 500-acre land, but they were both illiterate. They could not read. And because of that, their land was taken and stolen by what is put in the papers as white settlers. They call them settlers. Their land was settled. And because they could not read, they could not find legal ramifications to keep their property. And so they lost their property. Now, I have to believe that with 500 acres of land passed down generationally, we would not see George Floyd being arrested and subsequently murdered for allegedly passing a $20 bill. That is the nature of wealth being passed down generationally. And so here in Eugene, we also have problematic history of the first historic black families having their land taken from them, their homes taken from them, their businesses stolen, to where some of those businesses that were stolen are now thriving. And you can see their names on the side of their trucks today. And I want to give a shout out to those first families. We have the Washingtons, we have the Johnsons, we have the Reynolds, we have the Mims. Give a round of applause, please. They were not allowed to live in city limits due to city ordinances. Black people were not allowed to live in city limits. So they had to camp out on the riverfront. But then the city decided they wanted to expand. And so they were kicked out of their homes, their own property, so that Ferry Street Bridge here could be built. And they were pushed out to West 11th in tents. One of the families, I believe it was the Washingtons, have the first triplets born. Oh, it's the Johnsons? Thank you. It's the Johnsons have the first triplets born here in the city of Eugene. Oh, I'm sorry, in Lane County. 2 days later, they were kicked out of their own homes and forced to move out. This is the history of Eugene, and it must be spoken to. Now, I'm going to have someone who is very dear to my heart speak to this. I'm going to bring up a woman who has spent a lot of time in the service of this community. She spent countless years helping young people thrive and flourish at the University of Oregon. A woman whom without I would not have had a successful undergrad at the University of Oregon. I might not have graduated without her love and support. She is the woman for whom the Black Cultural Center is named after. There is so much I can say, and my words would not do it justice. So please welcome Miss Lily Parker.
Good evening to you. It's happened so many times in my life that I'm neither heard nor I'm seen. So let's try that again. Good evening to you. All right, I'm somebody. And when I speak to you, it's very respectful for you to speak back to me. Thank you. And I want you to know I'm not angry. I'm very passionate. That's why I have done what I have done and accomplished all my life. My name is Lily Reynolds Parker. I am the seventh child born to the union of Sam and Maddie Reynolds. I claim to be the first Black baby born at Sacred Heart Hospital. I make that claim because my original birth certificate tells me my parents were white. That was a cover-up. But I understood why they covered it up. In a community, in a county that was notoriously ran by the Klan, the good sisters could not let it be known that they let a Black woman give birth in their facility. So I'm born and raised in Eugene, Oregon. I am a product of this community. God has blessed me with 74 years in this community. I didn't stay because I had to. I stayed because I had a desire to see things change. I was a part of the civil rights movement of the 60s. I was also vice president of our SNCC chapter here in Eugene, founded at Henry D. Sheldon High School. I belong to a faith-based activist group led by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I went through nonviolent training so that when I was out there in the field, I knew how to represent those I was representing. First of all, I was representing God, because he's the author and the finisher of my faith. And then I was representing my family, who worked hard to raise 11 children in this hostile community. And then I was representing every African American that resided here in these United States of America. My behavior reflected on them just as it does today. It's very easy to label people. So Black people were lazy, dangerous, thieves, criminals. Ask our president, he'll tell you we're criminals. It's very easy to label folks, and you know what happens? People buy those labels. They take them to the bank and make deposits. And so some people in Eugene look at me and they're instantly frightened because my skin is brown. and they go back to what they seen on TV in the 50s and 60s, all the savages in Africa with spears, half dressed, beheading folks and eating people. So you assume that that was true. And then you assume that when they brought my people over here, that kind of behavior came with us. Shame on America. Shame on us. I want you to know, I was a product of my environment in the 60s. So yes, I did get involved in the civil rights movement. I did a lot of testing. I took a test for Pacific Northwest Bell, which was the telephone company then. They told me I got the highest score of anyone who took their test. Oh, but we're so sorry. You're so overweight, our insurance won't cover you, so we can't hire you. You see, that's what happens. That's why when you tell us to pull ourselves up by our bootstrap, if we don't have a strap, we can't pull on anything. And this community made sure that the Black community was left wanting. My father worked in a sawmill here. I don't believe he ever made more than $1.25 an hour. And off of that salary, he and my mom raised 11 children. I want you to know, a couple of us may have went to jail, but none of us went to prison. Brother Sam went to jail because he was adamant about civil rights. And as John Lewis would say, he did good trouble. And I'm proud of my brother. Because of circumstances in Eugene, Oregon, I was 40 years old before I could enter into the University of Oregon. 40 years old, I entered with my daughter's graduating high school class. 1986 graduated, in 1991. And in 1995, I went back to that institution as a professional. I stood in the gap for a lot of students of color. And not only that, I stood in the gap for a lot of white students because I could see the potential that the white folks couldn't see. So if they had a bad quarter, they tried to come out, and I said, not today. If we bought them here, then we're gonna give them the tools necessary for them to be successful here. That I looked at as my calling from God, and I stayed there. I went through hell. I did. Some hard days. There were those who looked at us and the work that we did as minimum. They didn't want to give us credit. See, we were more than academic advisors. We were counselors. We were psychologists. We were ministers. We were role models. And we were everything a student needed to survive in a hostile environment. And yes, it could be hostile. I was very blessed to be there. So this is really what I want you to understand. Because God has truly been good to me. When you're representing me, I don't have violence. I don't have violence in my DNA. I'm not gonna burn nothing down. I'm not gonna try and hurt anybody. I'd probably get hurt trying to put my arms around you and give you a big hug. So if you're gonna represent me and what I need in this country, if you're coming for war, you're hurting me and you're hurting our cause. Dr. King didn't teach us to go out and set fire to anything. And you know what? During that epoch of time, did you see John Lewis talking about how they hit him over the head with an iron pipe? He didn't retaliate, he went down. If you watch the news report from the 60s and see the folks being rolled down the street with fire hoses, seeing attack dogs, cattle prods, they didn't retaliate. That's not what we were out there to do. Would it be understandable if Black America was filled with the hate that we experience every day because we have melanin in our skin? Yes, it would be understandable because we have been through the fire in this country, a country that we built by the sweat of our backs. But you know what? We're not angry. We hate nobody. We hate the circumstances. We hate the behavior, but we don't hate the people that magnify that behavior. We can learn to live in peace and harmony. Don't look at me and be afraid. Look at me and see a sister who loves you, who wants only the best for you. I don't care who you are. If I can help you, I'll put you on my shoulders and carry you because I sat on the shoulders of so many who came before me. This rally is about unity, doing things in decency and in order. If you're going to represent me with decency and order. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Lily Parker. She's one of my mentors, one of my heroes, one of my inspirations. She is a pillar of this community and needs to be respected as such. I thank you so much. Now, it must be said that racism is not just a black and white issue. There are strong sentiments of anti-blackness within different ethnic communities of people of color. And that is why terms like BIPOC and people of color, minority, and black are problematic. They lump other ethnicities of Americans with different histories than ours into our struggle, and they historically have benefited from the political work that we've done more than we have. For example, affirmative action was made for Black people. But we've seen that by and large, affirmative action benefits single white mothers more than it does Black people. When the truth is that when Black people do get justice, everybody else benefits. A great example of that, yes, it's very true. A great example of that is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The March on Washington and all the work that was done before led up to Lyndon Baines Johnson signing this bill, giving us a lot of hope. And because of that, the very next year, 1965, there was an Immigration Act that was signed, which by and large was pasted and copied from the Civil Rights Act. So when we get justice, everybody gets justice. But the problem is, for the most part, we do not get a benefit from the work that we do. And that is a big problem. We must be specific on what we are fighting for and for whom. We have to be specific. We have to be specific, just as Latino is specific. Native American and Chinese American are specific ethnic identifiers. ADOS, being the American descendants of slavery, is just a very specific ethnic identifier. We're not talking about a movement. This is not just a hashtag. This is an ethnic identifier, letting people know who is to be benefited from the work that is done, letting people know who is disproportionately affected by these unjust laws and policies, letting people know who it is that are being publicly executed by police. It is the American descendants of slavery, commonly known as Black people, misnomer as African American, and lumped into people of color and recently into BIPOC. But it is not all those people. It is the American descendants of slavery, and it must be known as such. we must be specific. We must never forget who and what we're talking about. If we do, history will be rewritten. As it is in Texas, they've already written out the word slavery from the history books because people allow it to be so, because people have not been specific. Instead of slavery, they use involuntary migrant worker. And they're choosing to not say it was Black people. We have to be specific. They were slaves, and we are the descendants of those American slaves. We have to be specific on who we're talking about. Now, to speak to this, I want to bring up a woman who is a wife, a mother, and one of the organizers of this event, Miss Talia Stroud.
Hello, good evening. Well, my name is Talia Stroud. I was born just up the street also at Sacred Heart Hospital, and I was raised here in Eugene along with 3 sisters. My mother was an early childhood educator and my father a career police officer here in this community. They are both Army veterans, and together they raised us 4 girls, and if you know them, you probably love them. I have been married to Joshua Stroud for 20 years. And together we are raising 7 children. We are active advocates for foster care and adoption in this community, and that's something that's very dear to us. To sum up my many years in this community, I would say, aside from the occasional microaggressions, feelings of being left out from peers, and the personal struggles with differentness, I had a beautiful childhood with a loving family, and still to this day, a wonderful community around me. I know many are not fortunate enough to say the same. And as a follower of Jesus Christ, my faith compels me to care. My faith also compels me to speak against the defamation and misrepresentation of Christ in history and scripture, and in the ways the Christian church and professing followers are complicit in many ways. That is not lost on me, but I will save that for another day. To segue into what I'm talking about here, I want to quote James Baldwin. The paradox of education is precisely this, that as one begins to become conscious, one begins to examine the society in which he is being educated. And likewise, he also said, I love America more than any other country in this world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. If you do any length of study on the data, you will find that there is an enduring caste system here in America. If we are not careful, we will lose sight of whom this movement is supposed to be for. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tamir Rice, Elijah McClain, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, Eric Garner, the list goes on and on. These people not only died wrongful deaths by those sworn to protect them, but they also share a lineage. They are American descendants of slavery, and this movement started because of their deaths. We chant their last words, and we even make merchandise of them, which I'm conflicted about. To not make this people group the focus is to dilute the movement, and it's actually another form of saying all lives matter. Over 400 years of slavery, convict leasing, Jim Crow laws, domestic terrorism through lynching, redlining our communities, mass incarceration, and ultimately blocking every avenue to prosperity. And the racial wealth gap is a consequence of all of this. These people have a legitimate justice claim with our nation. To appropriate divert or infuse others into the focus is to continually perpetuate the injustice of the people who have yet had a chance to be made whole as the very citizens who built this country. This has repeatedly happened throughout the civil rights movements of the past, as Andiel mentioned. Black, Indigenous, and people of color are from a variety of people groups, and they each have their own histories and often known countries of origin. They all have endured their own suffering and injustices as well. And I encourage each of them to take up their cause and seek their own justice claim with the responsible parties. We must not allow 400 years and some of atrocities to not be credited to the right people. We truly believe that all lives matter. However, in this movement and in this moment, we need our Black, brown, and white brothers and sisters to rally around the American descendants of slaves to finally bring them the justice the United States owes them. I will end with this quote from the late Representative John Lewis. When historians pick up their pens to write the history of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. Thank you.
Thank you, Talia, for that very clear and concise message. So those are our talking points for today. But can I ask you, did you all learn something that you didn't know today? Did anybody? Are we in agreement for at least most of it? Can we say that a lot of this makes sense? Can we say that? Now, what we never want, no activist group, no political group, no politician, no community leader ever wants to have an event and say, wasn't that fun? And then we go home with nothing to do, with no action items. So we have, we want to make sure that we know what the next steps are. We want to make sure that everybody knows how they can lend their support. We want to make sure that we are all moving forward in unity to make sure that this change that we are talking about actually does happen. And to that effect, I'm going to bring up someone who's going to speak to that. This woman has been here. She's a transplant. She's been here since she's 11 years old. She has been a figure in the community since she's been here. She's known and loved by many. She's one of my peers, someone who I look up to quite often, someone I envy, and someone I love very dearly. She is also a wife, and also a mother, and also one of the organizers of this rally. Please welcome Carmen Myers.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. As Andiel said, my name is Carmen Myers. I've been in this community for a very long time, and I love this community. Can you hear me now? All right. As I said before, my name is Carmen Myers. I've been in this community for quite some time now, and I love this community. And this is my home. The final reason we are here is to talk about next steps, as Andiel said. And I want you to know that a lot of these action items are already in process. Before I begin, I do want to reiterate and thank all of the people in the community that have already been championing this work. To name a few: Henry Levert, Councilman Greg Evans, Linda and Rick Hamilton, Eric Richardson of the NAACP, Black Unity, Jennifer Scurlock, our mayor, our chief of police, and so many more. So thank you. As we spoke of over and over this evening, we truly do need police reform. Chief Skinner, who is in attendance today, don't mind waving in the crowd, he is in support of this gathering and has already made commitments and is working on various reforms, as he has stated, with Senator Manning and other leaders for the betterment of our community. Thus, as was stated before, we need meaningful reform and true accountability to the Black community and the community at large. And I believe we have a chief of police that is committed to doing so. Secondly, every Black person and this city owes a debt to the first Black families in this community. Please let's give a round of applause once again. With that said, it is my responsibility and my honor to echo and stand with the many voices over the decades for their justice claim. We need to publicly acknowledge what has happened in the past to these families and figure out the proper means of restoration with the input of these families. Mayor Lucy Byanis and Eugene City Mayor Sarah Maderi, who are also here today in support, have agreed to assemble teams and committees to begin to explore how to make this a reality. We want to encourage, finally, we also want to encourage the many efforts that are being made by our city and state to address the challenges that Black businesses face. Both Senator Manning and Mayor Byanis have made commitments to work with our local and state legislatures to address these problems and find meaningful solutions. At the beginning of the year, my pastor ended every sermon of a series with Psalm 139, 23 through 24, and I'm going to read that if that's okay. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. I hold myself accountable to my faith, and as do the other organizers. And we as a community need to hold our leaders, our elected officials, and our community at large accountable. We need ongoing, transparent, selfless pursuit of justice, equity, and reconciliation for the often overlooked American descendants of slavery. And I just want to end, wouldn't it be amazing if our city, this little city, Eugene, Oregon, could be a model for our state, for what reconciliation looks like, and for our nation at large. So let's move forward. Let's not just leave here in unity. Let's leave here in unity and in action. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. And before we get out of here, I want to invite the mayor up to make a statement. We cannot have unity. We cannot have change without cooperation of everyone involved. Okay, very important that we all move together, that we all are all unified in what our goals and our beliefs are. We have to be single-minded and we have to be focused. And I am very grateful for those who have met with us for their public statements of support and for all of the gestures and the help that they have made. Now the goal is to affect change, so we must all be held accountable. That's us individually and as well as those in power, our officials, our city officials. And to that effect, I would like to invite Mayor Lucy Byanis to come up.
Thank you. We are here today to affirm and commit ourselves to Black Lives Matter and to join together in an historic pursuit of reform, restoration, and reconciliation. The city of Eugene embraces the work before us. We recognize that the injustice faced by Black Americans today is rooted in the legacy of slavery. And our response to the American descendants of slavery calls on us to fully acknowledge and hold ourselves accountable for the acts and structures in our own city that have perpetuated the losses that began with that slave history. I am proud to join these leaders today to commit to work with you to reform police policy, to explore with you and our historic Black families the ways we can repair the losses our policies have inflicted, and to invest in opportunities that support leadership and success in Black businesses and throughout other sectors in our community. We are committed to addressing the corrosive impact of racism in our community, in our policies, in our institutions, in our laws, and in our behaviors. I'm grateful for your leadership and for all of you who stand in support today. And I am inspired and excited by the work we will do together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. As we close out, we have a few more points, housekeeping and announcements. So I'm going to invite Mr. Joshua Stroud to come up here and speak to those.
Just really quick, thank you guys for coming. Like we've said over and over, we're seeking to be a unified group of individuals. We're all pieces of, or all fingers of one fist. We're thankful for Black Unity and the other groups showing up. Senator James Manning is interested in making sure that we know about a blood drive, and it's important that we address some of the issues within the community in addition to the ones that we mentioned. On Friday, August 7th at 252 Lawrence Street, Eugene, from noon to 5 p.m., there's going to be a blood drive, and all the money will go to or for the purpose of sickle cell anemia. They're looking for more African Americans to show up. So if you would please bring your friends, your neighbors, more than just African Americans, but specifically us. Let's show up and assist and support that effort. Before we go, we'd like to pay homage to the Black National Anthem. And so I'd like to invite my sister up to come and sing the national anthem. If we would stand, please.
Thank you. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoices rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling seas. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the presence has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new days begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Hey, yo, God bless y'all. I'm Jason Floyd. I am a proud friend and member of what's going on here. Anyway, I just wanted to suggest to all y'all to be autodidactic. That means to be self-educated. There's a lot of information and forgotten history that's out there. There's a lot of different resources, so you can be up on things for the best practices going forward. I suggest The Color of Law. I suggest how to be anti-racist. I suggest White Fragility. These are all different resources that you can utilize to have a better understanding of the perspective of what we're trying to achieve as a group, right? So when the tide rises, all boats go up. So let's be together on that, and thank y'all for being here today. All right, peace.
Finally, let me just say that what we are doing here, what our goal was to unify, was to get information out there and to push forward in our next steps and make change actually happen. What you will not see most of us do is you will not see most of us marching and protesting for various reasons. That is what the other activist groups are championing. They have the energy, they have the zeal, they have the power, they have all of that, and we need them to use that, and we need to be in support of that. So we thank Black Unity for being here in support, and we thank you for the work that you're doing. We thank all of the groups that are making that change. What we are here specifically to do is to do research, to present data, to give education and information, because it is very important that we do not speak out of ignorance. It is very important that we do not make choices without knowing enough, okay? Not lending in energy without knowing the proper information that goes along. So that's what our main focus is, to get information out there, to let you know where, when, how, and more importantly, why. So I thank you all for coming out here. I thank God for allowing this to go peacefully. I thank you for your hearts and your minds to be open and allowing peace and truth to be heard. Thank you. Go with God. God bless you. Be on the lookout for more information.
Oh, you saw on the live stream? Yeah. Yeah.